Starting my speech in three, two, one. We have maybe 80 years on this earth to make something of ourselves, to find meaning, to find community, and for some people, to find money. The case from opening government is simple. Religion gives you a meaning to your life that is consistent, that is always there for you, and makes you feel like you have worth all the time. But second of all, a communal religion gives you a type of support system that is certain and such a huge benefit that it can protect you from the worst of harms that opposition will talk about. However, a secular society is often unstable. Even if it is not, it's likely to give you a hedonic treadmill, which you will keep running on until you run out of lactic acid and cramp up. Firstly, then, on meaning. There's three reasons as to why you get significantly more happiness in your life from religion. First of all, there's a feeling of you being part of something bigger and an aim for you to strive towards that doesn't go away based on your successes or falsehoods. It's often very likely this religion makes the bar low for people, and it's also likely that these rules continue to be better because even communal religions that tend to have strongly tied communities often come from larger sects that push towards liberalization. And no more important than that, if you live in a town to attract more followers, you need to be something that is enjoyable and malleable and something that people actually believe in. So the rules are likely to be quite simple, and the rules are likely to be something that becomes more and more accepting of more people. But more importantly, the rules are simple to understand. Even if you don't think that it's liberal, it's probably conservative in some instances, sure, but it's still easy to follow. You just have to do the things that the book tells you. It's a very certain moral metric. On the other hand, on opposition in secular society, if you want the benefit of opposition, which is the agency to choose between different religions, you need to be someone who can see the differences in different scriptures and their obligations that you must follow. Hence, you will never be certain that the moral harm or benefit you're creating is something that is objectively true, because if you were so certain, you would never switch between religions and lose the benefit of agency on side opposition. But second of all, you don't get happiness in all of these things and the feeling of aim from side opposition because often you don't believe in these aims because you always have a doubt in the back of your mind because you are surrounded by people who are atheists, surrounded by people who are constantly questioning the beliefs of your religion. So you don't get the constant feeling you're creating something bigger. You don't constantly feel like you are moving in a good direction, which gives you the happiness required to feel safe in your darkest moments. Second of all, happiness in the simple things is really important because note that on opposition, you're stuck on a hedonic treadmill. You have to keep achieving more things. If you focus on things like work, if you focus on things like being better at debate, God forbid you do that, you probably have to keep getting better at it in order to feel better again, because at the point you become good at something, you want to be even better at it. Religion, on the other hand, doesn't do this. In fact, there's very little comparison of people with money in the eyes of God. And also, even if there's slight hierarchies in the sense of who does more things to appease that God, in general, a communal religion focuses on
You know
the
what?
benefits going to other people. No, thank you. And as a result, the benefits you create are something that on a frequent and consistent level make you
What
happy.
are you
There
saying?
isn't measuring people in the eyes of God. It's also very difficult to understand because people don't want to pass judgment in a way that God can't. Sorry, only God can. So often people feel happy in the little things. They see beauty in the flowers on the street because they see it as God's creation. They see beauty in the love that they get from their family and their friends in the first place. See you quickly. See you.
Yeah. Would you like to be brainwashed to access happiness if you could do that behind the veil of ignorance?
Yes. Third response, death. It is something that is always consistent in everyone's life. We are all dust, and the way that life works is that you're going to be gone eventually. And you are scared of what will happen of your legacy and what will happen of your children and your future and so on. What religion does when you believe in it truly is that you feel like you will constantly be rewarded for your actions. But more importantly, often it believes, so you believe to a large extent that the help you provide to other people, the benefits you've given to those will be rewarded. As a result, you often feel like there's something that you will actually have after your death. You don't feel afraid of that impending day. So, this gives you significant peace in your later lives, which is a big part of it. This looks like the days when you become 60 or 70 and you could die of an illness, or you feel more worried about your health sinking in the first place. And that constant dread and oncoming fear of death becomes much easier to deal with. Third of all, these are the impacts from meaning. First, in the most difficult moment, this meaning will get you through life. The risks that you constantly have, the fact that therapy is possible is not a solution because it is quite unaffordable for most people. And also, therapy is a process of fixing harms that doesn't work if you don't put the effort in and also don't know how to do it. Even if you get the best therapist, Often that takes a huge amount of effort. And at the end of it, you just learn to manage your thoughts. But now, often you have something that gives you an absolute benefit, which is that you constantly feel like a good person. And your friends and family will have the strength to support you because on site opposition, they might not feel like they can when you have depression or when you go through a ridiculously difficult financial crisis. But your friends and family have faith that you will get through it on the side where they believe in religion and you have a larger community to support you. Second of all, let's talk about community. Before that, yeah, no, I already taken a POI. Okay, before that, I'm just going to point out one more thing. Agency can't be how you chose this debate. First of all, most of the decisions you're going to make when you start taking like a lot of like when you are born are going to be controlled by your environment. As a result, most of those decisions will be decided by who you are raised by and the people around you. And yes, in a communal religion, that means it'll be decided by the religion. In a secular society, that means it'll be decided by the secular society. You could grow up in India, where you could still be part of a religion, perhaps, but it'll be part of a religion that might be hateful, might be evil, and that might change your life. Or you could make decisions internally, but that needs to come from your biological features like your brain, but you don't know how your brain is making decisions. If it's perfect electrical circuits, then it's something you can't control, and as a result, was not in your control in the first place, so agency isn't that metric. But second of all, even if it is true that your brain is somehow randomly making decisions, you can't control that randomness. So there is no agency, and hence it doesn't matter. If someone says agency comes as a prerequisite to utility, I say that the reason you make a decision is because you like it, and that means agency comes after utility. So utility clearly weighs above agency. Second, on community, three benefits. First, a safety net that goes further than the safety net you get on opposition. People from around this community are likely to give you money when you're sick, help you out when you need your car fixed, help you take you to work because they feel like it's their obligation to do so. Second of all, lots of love and support that comes from people even if you become isolated, even if you have a fight with your friends, even if you have a breakup which you can't deal with. That means that you have a larger amount of people who care about you, while in secular societies, they're competing with you. Often they're your co-workers who want to get higher positions than you. They're your friends and family who have their own obligations and don't feel it's their obligation to help the community. Third of all, support for your emotional problems in the form of a priest or other religious organizations, because people care about your mental health because they feel like they'll benefit from it. The impact of this is that in general, frequently you feel like you're achieving something and you feel like people have your back. And if that isn't enough to have a happy life, I don't know what is. Very proud to propose.
Okay. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. I don't disagree with virtually anything that Sharia is saying, and yet we will win. Here's why. Let's start with the very simple fact that the stuff that Sharia says about utility as a prerequisite to agency is probably correct. I am willing to agree with that. However, what I also will say is that in order to have that utility, you actually need to subscribe to the values of this community, and you need to live in this community in such a way that you are actually compatible with that community. What do I mean by this? That you are not, for example, a filthy homosexual who is despised by God and whose biological internal decision making prevents them from falling for the woman the way that the community wants them to. This is incredibly significant because of what the veil of ignorance actually is, which has not been framed by government, but I will do that for you. The veil of ignorance is a philosophical concept under which, before we are born, we do not know how we will be born. We only know what society we want to construct for ourselves. Thus, we choose between what rules of society we want to create, absent knowledge, whether we will be gay, whether we will be a woman, whether we will be whatever the kind of thing that we want to be. That means that under the veil of ignorance, we have to contend with the fact that we might be gay, we might be a woman, we might be some kind of a different entity, we might be some kind of skewed person, or that sort of thing. Here's then what the community looks like for the person who is, a gay, shall we say. 1, the God is all-knowing. The religious leaders have an incentive to present the God as all-knowing because that means that they get to control the thoughts and the minds of the followers. This is because there is simply an incentive to control and an incentive to keep people in line, partly because you have a financial incentive to perpetuate your control over them so that they pay money into the community-based projects, like, for example, a local church. If you do not control their devotion, then again, they do not have an incentive to do that. You have both a personal incentive and a religious incentive, considering that you are a religious leader in that kind of place. You do genuinely believe in the glory of God, and you want to condition that, and you want to condition your followers into also doing that. You want to prevent them from thought crime because you want them to be pure and good for the God, as well as pure and good and fine. So basically, like, whether the leader is cynical or actually idealistic doesn't matter. They will still have an incentive to control the thoughts and hearts of the followers. This means that they are likely to present the idea to their followers that the God can see their thoughts and that the God controls their thoughts and that it is sin to have wrong thoughts. This is then important because even if you are not practicing homosexuality, even if you are not a practicing sodomite, you are still someone who has those unnatural desires, and you are still someone who, sees a man, for example, while being born with a penis and thinking, oh my God, this guy is hot. Why am I feeling this way? Why can't I just feel the same way for the women? Why can't I do what God wants me to do? Why can't I just feel the same way for the people who I am permitted to actually fall in love with? Which means that when you are in this in this strong community values, you are going to think about this. You are going to think, first of all, for your religion, second of all, for your community. You will think very strongly about whether or not you are disappointing your community, whether or not the thing that you are doing is actually a right thing in the eyes of the community. You will live with a lot more preconditions on actually how you can be happy, how you can enjoy your life. Because at every single point, you will think about all of the good things that the community does for you, all of the religious control that have been implanted into you by this community, by this strong community bonds. Because again, the community bonds also help keeping you in line by the fact that you don't want to disappoint your pleasant grandmother neighbor who takes you to church since you were 7. You don't want to disappoint her. You feel the eyes of that grandmother when you engage in your first homosexual kiss in a club because you got a little bit drunk, because you got out of the bounds of this community. Which means that even if you break out of this, even if you ever follow the thing that can truly make you happy, fall in love with someone who is compatible with you, even when that happens, you will still feel the unmerciful eyes of your God disapproving of you, the eyes of your God and the eyes of your community disapproving of you. And even if they disapprove of you mildly and kindly, and the problem with this is that you will still be locked out of either having the approval of the people who are so important to you in your life, or you will be locked out of the approval and locked out of the fundamental part of what makes you human, of ability to be in love, of ability to ever make a family that can be meaningful to you, of an ability to have someone who you can share your life with. This is incredibly significant considering the fact that the likelihood of you being gay is at the very least 10%, considering that even in the underreported world of significant stigma against homosexuality, we are at least 10%, at least, which means that, again, this is a really high probability case. And because, again, you have to weigh the risk. And again, most people are going to be risk averse because this is a horrible prospect to be contending with. You can find meaning in the community, in the secular community. You can opt into a religious community, which means that the benefits that are coming from specifically being forced into that community need to be so much far outweigh this horribly ridiculous harm, which is the most significant harm in this debate, because at the point where you are prevented from doing what makes you human, from doing what makes you truly happy, from having something that is genuinely long-term happiness, because again, you can opt into being in love with someone, you can actually find meaning in the heart of that person. It's going to be very difficult to find a calling outside of another people, considering how social an animal we are as a human. That means that this probably should be the most important thing in this debate, and this is already sufficient to win us the debate just based on that significant harm. But I'll also flip why the community actually gets worse on the just agency stuff, and how agency while it's not preconditioned to utility, it is the only way that the utility can actually be positive. Before that, I would like to take a POI from CG, considering that OG is too scared to actually offer anything.
OG, POI?
CGPOI. Conservative societies exist within secular societies too. Homophobia and transphobia is just used through religion, of course, but these types of things already
this
exist.
is missing the entire framing on how the community values part of it and how God is all-seeing part of it is so significant. Because when you are a gay person in a conservative society, such as, I don't know, for example, India, or I don't know, Poland, we are both from Poland. Even like when you aren't perceiving yourself through the lens of, I will disappoint all those people I actually care about, I will disappoint my God who values me and who judges me and who sees inside my head, I can do those things because, again, even if I am stigmatized, I am not internally stigmatized. I do not lock myself out of accessing those things. The only thing that is happening is that, secondarily, it's just the probability, right? It's much more probable that religious communities are going to be homophobic. We had some material I was meant to run, but Camila is going to do it in TPM in DLO. Anyway, I just wanna add this little thing at the end, right? Religious communities, like conservatism of the most important thing here in terms of the communities actually getting better is also the fact that at the point where you opt into this is a choice that you make, and you actually feel valuable to this community much more as well by the fact that you make that choice, that you are a convert and not someone who has been forced into it, which means that even then you access greater utility by opting into it from growing up in a secular society. We win all fronts.
Okay, starting in 3, 2, 1. Firstly, panel, I'm going to deal with O, then I'm going to give you, an intense amount of weighing to ensure that we still take out CO. Okay, what does O tell you, right? I think they tell us basically one big thing, which is just to say that, like, because you have to live under a higher level of pressure in these communal, like, communities or whatever, if you are someone who is like gay and oppressed by these communal values, whatever, you're likely to like quote unquote suffer more, right? I'm going to tell you why this is not the case for a couple of reasons. A, this is likely symmetrical in both worlds. This is to say that people who, could hypothetically be oppressed in their communal society can also be suppressed in their secular society. So this is like mitigatory at best. And then I like, traditional Indian culture could hate you. Americans who aren't religious could also be anti-gay, right? But I think even if, say, this does even matter as much as O is saying, A, because your community cares about you more than general society, they're going to use more effort to understand you. What does this look like, right? Because they believe that you share the connection of these transcendent beliefs, right? You are connected on a spiritual level. They care about you intensely rather than just general society who believes, yeah, we have like, opposing beliefs, right? This means that they're going to return the amount of care for you because you are like community based, right? I think, this might be bad in the short term because they're like, yeah, what the fuck? What do you mean you're gay, right? But I think they're going to put more effort into like trying to understand you because they care about you so much. In a secular society, even if you say we concede the short term fact that like, yeah, they're not going to protest largely at first, they're not going to have as much of an issue like coming out as gay, things like that, right? They're also likely to not give enough shits to help your life improve. Hence, you'll probably just be alone anyways, right? So I think, on that, like, it doesn't like really matter for the crux of their case. Onto like weighing then, and then some like integrated reputation rebuilding, whatever, things like that. I'm going to weigh this on a couple of things. Firstly, on intensity. For intensity, right? I think there are two portions to this, or well, 3 or 4, right? Whatever. I'll list them as I go on. Firstly, on material benefits, right? Like, I don't think that, based on this motion that we don't know if you're going to get money, things like that. So this, any amount of like material benefit that they want to use to like set as like a metric for this debate isn't going to matter, right? And I also think like, we can probably, intuitively assume that in a secular society, they're going to be quote unquote more competitive, right? Because you have these differing beliefs and these communities are more spread out, right? And so they're all competing for things for themselves, right? In terms of non-material benefits, not right now, I'll tell you when I'm going to take it, right? Like, given that multiple religions and ops benefit is like probably going to be agency at some point, this also means that you're unsure. So you don't know which belief is yours, and you have to be someone who is open-minded or able to change minds. If this is the case, you're unable to access the large amounts of joy that you 100% get on what Sharia tells you is our case, right? Thirdly, then, on compounding intensity, right? Understand that community keeps you happy through all monads, whereas like this choice of like, oh yeah, I have like more agency only matters when you think about that choice. And then I think finally then, on frequency, because every burden gets less heavy when you can share it, every joyful moment is also multiplied when these people support you. So, you graduate from like university, whatever, your community is more close-knit, you'll be happier, right? I also think that these financial crises get better, whatever, and you can pay hospital bills because your community is based off of like, ensuring that the other people in your community are able to survive and have like as good of a life as possible because you believe that you should be connected in this way. Then quickly then onto like certainty, right? And I think this also kind of still deals with like O's case or whatever, right? If say like let's say religious people are 30% more homophobic, there is still a 3% chance that you are gay, right? If you multiply this by a 30% chance that it was quote unquote the religion that made this difference, there's still like a 1% chance, like 99% of this benefit is still going to be ours. I also think that uncertainty, you're uncertain what's going to happen in a secular society, but it's certain that you'll get support in a communal society, right? This is to say that oftentimes a lot of secular societies that aren't run by these large communal like religions or whatever tend to be really tense because people argue over what is the correct belief, right? You know what, sure, I'll take a POI from closing if they have one.
Yeah, so my question is, states like Texas, which has like a very like a high amount of religious people, would you consider them as like secular state? Because you're like saying how US is like secular in most cases.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't know much about Texas. I'm assuming they're mostly Catholic or Christian of some sort. Like, I don't think this is necessarily what a communal society. I don't really know what your point about this POI is. I think regardless, it like does not matter. We're telling you that the benefits of like a communal society is that you get this sense of community, right? Okay, then on to short-term and long-term, right? This is also where I think this possibly deals with CO's like possible extension, and then I think it still deals with like right? Okay, there are a couple options for what this looks like. A, you're born into a communal society and you stay in this communal society. You have a cushion before you go into the world in the short term, and you continue to have the support as you live your life, and then you likely, as a result of staying in this communal society, do not deal with all of like the oh my God, I'm gonna die soon because I'm old. Like, is there heaven? Is there hell? So you don't have to deal with these things. The second option is that you're born into secular, stay into secular. This is negatively impactful because you're alone throughout, right? you continue to struggle to find a community that you feel transcends all barriers, because all of your sense of community is probably based off of material things like your school community or your political belief community, things like this. And this is what continues as you deal with your thought process of what you truly believe in, whether you think like someone else is out there, whatever, things like that. C and D, so whether you're born into a communal society and then you transition to a secular society, or conversely you're born into secular and then transition into a communal, I think is what is going to deal with O, and then also CO, right? Okay, what does this look like? When you're born to communal and you transition to secular, at the very least, you have this cushion before you go out, and during your transition to the secular society, you still have this like thing that you can fall back on, and you likely don't deal with the before death questioning because you likely did a lot of that during your transition, right? Like, and then for being born in like a secular like community or whatever, and then you're like transitioning into like a communal one. I think I said that correctly, right? Because your first semblance to forming some sort of mentality around your beliefs and morals relies crucially on this open-mindedness, right? Because you come into this world looking to learn, looking to think, what do I truly believe in, right?
Why?
Even if you're able now to transition into this communal society, your devotion is likely never going to be as strong as those born into communal society, because your first instinct is always to be open-minded and to always question. I think this largely co-opts any of the benefits that we tell you we get with communal societies in terms of joy and things like that, right? I already talked about POI, I'm not taking another, right? Understand that, nothing else other than what Sharia has told you is consistently meaningful, right? Politics are hateful, and sometimes you lose. And philosophies often, like run the risk of being wrong. It is only faith that gives you this consistent and blind happiness. And then I think quickly, right, if we have to say deal with like the worst case, which I don't think CEO will bring up, but if they do say like a cult on our side, then I think they also have to concede that they have to deal with a society of violence. I think this also deals with Muzzi's POI, like in Shoria's speech. This is just to say that like the cult is such an extreme characterization. This is probably going to look like a society secularly with like a war zone. You can't weigh this debate because it's not shareable. Even if at least our side has community, at least people care about you in their like side in a secular society that is like filled with wars, whatever, nobody gives a shit. You're considerably more alone and you still suffer, right? For all others above, I'm very happy to oppose.
Firstly, I want to deal with the point coming from government that there's going to be conservatism and homophobia on both sides of the house, and this is symmetric. Note, this can be further from the truth. Religious communities are far more conservative for a number of reasons. I think, firstly, you have an active incentive to actually keep yourself isolated from wider society, which means you get less integration of wider values because you see them as polluting the purity of your community. Secondarily, it's indoctrinated into various religious scriptures as to why being gay is bad, as to why you shouldn't do this, as to why promiscuity is bad, and all these various narratives, which means insofar as it's integrated into the thing you view as having the highest value in the universe, it's likely going to be heavily integrated into this. Necessarily then, but also community leaders also have an incentive to keep it conservative insofar as it maintains their power and it keeps it going, especially given the fact that a lot of these community leaders are going to be older insofar as they've had to gain their authority and position in the community over time. I think then this becomes crucially non-symmetric because on our side of the house, you're exposed to a greater degree of secular and more liberal ideas that tell you that it's okay to be gay, that it's okay if you have desires that aren't aligned with the church. You have a greater exposure to this. But I think most crucially, note, on the government side, you are born into this narrative. You are taught this from the day you are born to the day you die. Everyone around you heavily hears this and preaches this and views this as the utmost truth in life, which necessarily means you internalize this to a horrendously high degree because one, you lack exposure to anything else, but secondarily, the people you care about, the people you trust, the people you love view this as the ultimate truth, therefore you view this too, which means necessarily that you internalize this to a heavy degree. This is harmful for a number of reasons. I think firstly, on the counterfactual, if you see homophobic propaganda as they posit happens on our side of the house, you're able to reject this and distance yourself from this because you do not view yourself as intrinsically a bad person because you are gay, because you think they're just fucked up and they're just discriminatory. But on their side of the house, you view yourself as like there's internally something wrong with you. Like you are broken, like you do not deserve this. I think then you also aren't able to actually isolate this. I think on the counterfactual, if you have thoughts that don't align with the church, or if you're gay or you have, say, ideas that don't align with them, you are able to express this in a secular society, even if it's conservative, because you're exposed to a greater degree, but also you have the capacity for exposure. On their side of the house, it's so deeply indoctrinated into you that all it takes is a thought that you deem to be and your religious community deems to be impure for you to have a meltdown, for you to think that you're going to hell, for you to basically isolate yourself and deal with a vast amount of emotional turmoil that comes from this. I'm going to take opening out one by one. I think firstly then, in the terms of community, this is contingent on you being able to actually opt into this and you being able to agree with the community. The moment you notice that you don't have the same beliefs as the community, the moment you notice that, for example, you're gay or that you have various ideas that differ from this, you're now not able to actually access the community because you feel as though you're polluting and contaminating the community, or you feel like a traitor because you don't agree with them, like an imposter who doesn't belong. This means that every interaction you have with the community becomes meaningless insofar as now you just feel fake. You have to put on a fake facade as to try to appeal to what they view to be a good person. But this is torturous insofar as even if you're able to fake it to the people, you know you can't fake it to God, which necessarily means that even after you're able to fake this into the community, the moment you get home, you feel as though God has seen this. God knows you fucked up. God knows you're not a good person. You're going to hell. Eternal damnation is the only thing that's awaiting for you. This is crucial. On our side of the house, you get far better community insofar as you're able to surround yourself by people who are aligned with you. Gov tells you this is going to be strictly materialistic. I think this is bullshit. I think humans crave an intrinsic sense of belonging. They want communities. I think families are inherently strong, even in secular societies, because you love one another, because you value each other. But also you're able to surround yourself by people who actually understand you, who actually support you, irregardless of what you believe, of who you love, of what you think. This is crucial because now the interactions you have are far more meaningful. They're far more pure. Even if they're not as devoted, they're actually meaningful to you internally because you do not feel like a fraud. Secondarily, you see beauty in the little things, is what we hear from Gov. I think once again, this is horrendously symmetric. Insofar as you admire your relationships with your family and friends, you can admire beauty in nature and sciences. Thirdly, the capacity to actually help you out. I'm again not sure why this is exclusive to religion. Note, they never actually tell you. I think what is important is that insofar as you have families and you have friends who care about you and do not want to suffer and have the same degrees of empathy and attachment to you, you're necessarily going to also have a great degree of support system. But note, I'm just not sure why, again, this is linked specifically to religion. I think even though in a secular society, it's more likely to be competitive, you still have attachment, you still have meaning. I think in terms of being a part of something bigger, I think once again, the entirety of government bench is contingent on you being a perfect follower of this religion who aligns perfectly with the values and is able to fully opt into this and actually be believing in their actions and aligning with this, then you get all of the benefits. But note, this is very unlikely insofar as the moment you feel as though you're actually not contributing to this, or maybe you are the burden in your community, you feel a religious responsibility because you're also bringing your community down insofar as your thoughts are impure, your actions are wrong, you necessarily can't think you're part of a bigger narrative. I think it's far more likely to feel as though you are part of something bigger on our side of the house insofar as you attach it to something attainable. In a secular society, you can set goals for a bigger aim, whether that be helping more people in society or creating good in society or just helping your family or just pursuing your own personal goals. This is actually attainable. It keeps you going. It keeps you motivated. I think crucially on their side of the house, a lot of their benefits aren't actually attainable insofar as they say you get closure because now your life has meaning and you're going to heaven and it's wonderful. What if you think you're going to hell? What if you think your actions and thoughts are impure? I think crucially, the moment this happens, your meaning and your existence comes crumbling down, and then the entirety of government doesn't stand. I'm out of time in terms of POI. I'm sorry. I think then crucially in terms of weighing, you ought to prioritize the actual intrinsic process of this person insofar as the harms are most proximate to them, because it's inescapable. The moment you're indoctrinated into this narrative that you have to have certain characteristics in order to be a good person, and the moment you don't align with them, you're subjected to a lifetime of emotional turmoil because you think there's something intrinsically wrong with you. You think you're a bad person. This is a close proximate harm that you're not able to fix because it's so deeply indented into who you are as a person. But secondarily, in terms of community and all their benefits, this is vastly symmetric insofar as you're able to get this to a higher degree and to a higher quality on our side of the house. But thirdly, in terms of what you hear in terms of being able to transition to a secular society, I think it's not that easy insofar as it's a high burden to actually leave this community. I think you ought to oppose this motion for the personal harms you face, for the vast amounts of community stigma and all the benefits being symmetric. Incredibly proud to oppose.
The day-to-day life in secular society for the average individual, for the poor individual, for the minority born and stuck without being able to access capital, without being able to access any of the state societal benefits that they talk about. People who are born without good families and good communities to give them support systems, as opposition claims they do, are all awful on secular society. 3 broad engagements that I like to bring to you within this debate. 1, why your Maslow's hierarchy of needs, your ability to get food, your ability to actually have access to any agency at all, exists uniquely on our side of the house with religious and communal things, and this is likely to be a certain benefit. Secondly, why you get choice blindness on their side of the house, and why this leads to a lot of existential angst and your inability to make decisions. And finally, why we fix existential angst on our side of the house, something that opening opposition can never uniquely do. Let's get to opening opposition's case, because opening opposition's case is a 10% completely blown out of proportion. They basically tell you that, oh, you might be gay, and if you're gay, this religious community is going to hate you. 3 responses. 1, it is unclear to me why all of these religious communities, at the point at which Sharia gives you reasonable framing, as they're likely going to be moderate and likely not going to hate you and likely have simple type of things, are going to actively be against you and actively harm you in the first place. Secondly, at the point at which these religious communities are probably going to be homophobic and transphobic, if that's the type of thing that you want to go off of, note within your secular society, there are much worse things you could be. You could be born to a poor community. You could be born within a minority community, stuck in U.S. prison industrial complex. You could be stuck as individuals that are discriminated against for fundamentally existing in the first place. Note, this means that not only is the problem symmetric, as opening government claims, but the problem is worse on their side of the house, because there are just much more arbitrary factors that you could be born into that necessarily lead to your life being worse off. Because if the worst case that they want to go off is, oh, suddenly you're gay, the worst case that could happen on their side of the house is that you're a child slave, stuck in bonded labor for your entire life with no ability to have any agency and used for the instrument as a tool for your entire life. Note the probability weighing within this debate. At the point at which they want to argue the worst case, and note, it's obviously bad to be within a homophobic and transphobic society, but we've already mechanized to you that these likely exist within secular societies, and also, importantly, note that these other individuals are probably going to still take care of you for other type of issues. You do not need to always express yourself. We are more than happy to concede that not being able to express yourself is a bad thing on this particular front, but you're still able to access yourself in other type of things, because here's the first extension, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Opening government tells you that, oh, you have access to certain communal benefits and this community is a good thing. We would like to extend this further. We would like to mention that within secular societies, there are a lot of anti-homeless propaganda. There are individuals who hate poor people because of the fact that they're considered lazy and unlikely to work due to the capitalist structure that exists. And note, because global capitalism does exist within secular societies, individuals are always going to be poor, and poor individuals will always exist. So you need to consider that when you're using the veil of ignorance. Insofar as this is true, if a poor person who doesn't have access to food, water, and the ability to live has to steal and probably has to go to prison, is very likely to happen at the point at which you don't have information about how this is going to happen. And this is going to be particularly bad for you, because this means you go to jail and you don't have the ability to eat, so you either die or you have no agency because you're stuck in prison. This is worse than anything that they have on their side of the house, because even if you can see that you're unable to express one facet of your identity, which is your sexuality, that doesn't matter, because at the point at which this is true, you are literally unable to survive on their side of the house. Why is this fixed on our side of the house? Insofar as you have a religious communal society, what likely exists is that these communal societies probably care about all individuals, because note two mechanisms. 1, a communal society likely means that they care about all people within the community, and secondly, at the point at which is religious, you are encouraged to think about things such as gratitude. You're encouraged to think of all people as brotherhood, the sons and daughters of God. At the point at which this is true, this is going to be good for you, because people are probably going to provide you food. Note, even if you want to argue that there are organized religions within these type of things, these organized religions do donations to poor. These likely means that you're going to at least be able to have a certain level of food, a certain level of livelihood, and a certain level of agricultural benefits that you have, which mean you're going to exist and be alive on our side of the house, something that you uniquely cannot guarantee on their side of the house. Second mechanism, choice blindness. And this is an important extension of the agency mechanism that OG tries introducing. At the point at which you have the ability to actually get into a religion, note how all of OG's benefits are unique, as OO points out, is difficult to actually make like non-symmetric. Because why is it uniquely that having access to one religion and being taught one religion specifically is only the way for you to access this type of meaning? Fundamentally put, because of the idea of Pascal's wager. At the point at which you are in a circular society, introduced to atheists, introduced to other religions, introduced to other extenuating forces that tell you religion is bad and these type of things might not be the way, you have no correct answers. There is no way for you to actually assure yourself of these type of answers to happen, and there is no way for you to be guaranteed of what you actually care about in life. This means that all the points of meaning, all the points of purpose uniquely do not exist for you at the point at which you do not have this in the first place. Before I get to my point on why choice blindness and existential angst get worse on their side of the house and why it is better on our side of the house, I'll take one from opening.
Even if we buy your shoddy weighing about why material needs are more important than spiritual needs and not thinking that you're doomed to eternal damnation, you still haven't proven that religious communities are going to be exempt from those narratives if they are widely spread out as they are in capitalist societies, and that religious communities are going to have
two major points. Firstly, secular society also has religious influences, which likely mean that homophobia and transphobia is symmetrical. Secondly, if you want to argue that, oh, why is it that the spiritual fulfillment is more like less important than material needs, I am more than happy to argue that. I am happy for the rest of my life to not have sex with another person for as long as it goes, as long as I can guarantee food on the plate, as long as I can guarantee water, shelter, and the ability to be alive. Note, spiritual fulfillment comes, the ability to have material fulfillment comes logically prior to having any type of spiritual fulfillment, because you cannot get these type of higher Maslow hierarchy of needs. Note how they completely missed our first extension. Final mechanism, existential X. The day-to-day life in secular society is corrupted and ruined by all the advertisements and individuals who are instrumentalizing you through the global capitalist system. This looks like individuals staying on their phone for hours on end because they don't know what to do. This looks like individuals crying because they can't get into the college that they want. This looks like individuals being unable to decide what job they want because people are forcing them to jobs that they don't care about in the first place. Note, this is an extension of OG's idea, because OG's idea is just that, oh, you're afraid of death. Our idea is simple. You are afraid of life on secular life because of the fact that all these extraneous factors, all these other people who are telling you to do all these different things, likely means that you are never able to decide. This is the choice blindness idea. When you have so many choices, you no longer have the ability to make any choice in the first place because you're constantly thinking about these other choices. You're constantly feeling like you're missing out on things. You're constantly feeling this fear of missing out, which is particularly bad. This is relevant then, because at the point at which all of this is true, uniquely existing on our side of the house, this type of simple Torahs, this type of simple instructions that exist on our side of the house is beneficial, because these type of simple things likely help you find meaning. These type of simple things likely mean that you do not need to constantly worry about what you're doing is bad. This means that your day-to-day life becomes meaningful. This means that your day-to-day life no longer is constantly worrying about death, no longer constantly worrying about I should be preparing for this next consulting interview. The day-to-day life becomes beautiful. The day-to-day life becomes something you look forward to on our side of the house. The day-to-day life, first of all, means you have the ability to actually live the day-to-day, because we've shown you uniquely why you get access to food and material responses on our side of the house. Secondly, we've shown you uniquely why the type of existence that happens within secular society is uniquely bad for you, because it basically inhibits your ability to find happiness, and it likely leads to existential angst and constant fear of missing out. And finally, we've shown you why this choice blindness uniquely means that you get all of these benefits on our side of the house, which let you find meaning, which let you find purpose, and wins opening government, because we've shown you uniquely why these ideas are not symmetric. Very proud to be closing government.
Am I audible?
Thank you very much. And now inviting member of opposition. Yep, you are audible.
Sorry. All right. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1, start. As a person living in Bangladesh, which probably has a lot of religious community with strong communal value, I can attest to the idea that we don't exactly live in a communist society, which is basically to tell you that we actually have capitalism, and all of the harms that they try to tell you, oh, capitalistic world have hedonic treadmill and so on and so forth, actually exists to a further worse extent, because of the fact mosques essentially cannot provide to you all of the benefits of the charity or the donation that they actually can talk to you about. And secular societies have actually better infrastructure in terms of helping you with like donations, charity, and like basically social welfare and so on and so forth. I'm going to provide to you structural reasons as to why that is true. But like before I do that, let me tell you what exactly is opening opposition missing out in this debate. So the problem with opening opposition's debate in this debate is that they essentially hinge their debate mostly based on a probability that you might be born as a gay person, or you might be born as a minority, or so on and so forth, which is it can be true, it might not be true, which if true, it can essentially show a lot of harms. We don't exactly are going to tell you that that doesn't happen, but what you mostly miss out on in a larger extent is to provide to you structural reasons as to why the comparative is much worse. That's why the closing probably gets away with by just saying, oh, this is symmetrical because of the fact that you also have similar amount of hate against transgender or gay people in a secular society as well. So the first bit of analysis or the extension that we are providing you, and this is going to be extremely crucial, and this directly deals with all the attempts of saying that this is a wash and this is symmetrical and so on and so forth, is the idea of why is it likely that secular societies are far more advanced than religious societies at the first place. So first of all, religion was required more at a point where advanced technology wasn't there at the first place to essentially provide with more solace and explanation of the unknown, and also as a form of catharsis if you're less well off. This is the idea in which those the religious framework was built in these particular religious countries and so on and so forth. But secondarily and more crucially, historically speaking, religious places from Middle East and so on were less interested in advancing technology or science because a lot of findings were directly against the ideology of religion to begin with. And this is historic, which is to say alchemy was considered literally black magic. And even in the golden age of science, people like Ibn Sina were literally discarded, whereas in Europe or secular areas, these people were advanced through a process in which these people were probably given like funding and so on and so forth. Whereas on the contrary, in these Middle East areas, these people would probably be considered as kafir, or probably be not even given any form of support in terms of advancing their ideology, which essentially means that all of the framework in terms of law or in terms of science or in terms of everything that was built in religious framework were extremely something that was built on very barbaric religious ideologies. For example, what we can see in the Middle East, that you have to kill someone just because of the fact that they probably stole something and so on and so forth. This is the way in which those institutions are based on. And here is the crucial comparative. Yes, institutions in US or Europe is bad, but institutions in those countries are literally barbaric, right? At least in this in somewhat of a better secular society, right-wing populist party have somewhat of a trade-off. Here's why Trump doesn't get elected over and over, right? And that is the worst example of a secular society in our side of the world. But secondarily, and more crucially, less reliance on religion on moral frameworks in secular philosophy, and atheism provides lots of reasons to abide by morals and higher level of framing as this society evolves. Thirdly, technologies that generally changes how you interpret religion, and people in secular society move on at this point. Science often contradicts religion to some extent, which I already explained to you in a large extent. What is the implication of this? Essentially, this also allows us to access the harms that opening opposition talks about, which is to say, being in a more developed society is just generally good if you're a woman or if you're a minority person. But if you're in general a person who is not any of those identity, even then if you're poor, which is the extreme painting that the site closing government tries to paint you, essentially you get to have the social welfare just because of the fact I have already told you that states which are more advanced are likely to be better in terms of providing you with the help, because there are better institutions, better democracy that exists, which essentially allows those institutions to do better check-ins. And under your set of world, you literally have to depend on a mosque imam who probably does hates other people based on their caste and so on and so forth, who probably doesn't even allow a person who is poor to be doing their prayers in the front of the prayers and at the first place. Now, why are you likely to find community under our side of the world as well? I'll take opening up government.
So we already weighed against materials and money, but if you're worried about where is violence more likely? When there's 3 or 4 religions and politicians can fight each other, like India, or in a place where there's only one religion and people explicitly help each other? This just seems a bit weird to me.
I'm just not getting the comparative. Even if there is one religion, and if it's like India, if you're a Hindu or so on and so forth, you probably get to access all of the benefits. But the problem is you're just living in a far worse area, right? Even if it's you're literally or in Bangladesh, if you're a Muslim, you're still likely to be having less and less of the benefit that we clearly talk to you at the very end of the day. Why you're still likely to find community, and this directly explains to argues with the idea of spirituality. First, you already have family, people who still care about you, who you're raised by, or who likely to have significant reasons to help you out at the first place. You still make friends, you still access to social media, Twitter, and so on and so forth. The difference is you are the one who get to create the community at the first place. And under our side of the world, you also get to have more autonomy and agency at the end of the day. Yes, their response is agency is not crucial. Agency is not absolute. We agree to that. But understand, under our side of the world, people who have strong religious sentiment essentially means your life is significantly dictated by people telling you what to do and what not to. For example, who you should be married to, who your friends should be, and so on and so forth. And essentially, there are a lot of scenes that exist, which essentially means that spirituality in of itself carves your life exploration to a large extent. Now, closing a government might be okay to not having premarital sex and so on and so forth. As a person living in Bangladesh, raised as a Muslim person who literally have to go through all of those things because of the fact that I cannot maximize happiness. I cannot access to like alcohol and so on and so forth. I understand what it means to have your religion to carve your exploration. And like for me, living in US, although I had to struggle a lot, it was much better just because of the fact I had more avenues of happiness, which means agency is something that is crucial to all of those things. For all these reasons, we win.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Note that religions are uniquely anti-capitalist. Note that the social welfare for the poor was much better 300 years ago when Industrial Revolution didn't happen, because you didn't have to starve to death on their side of the house. Note like homeless people starve out, don't get to live, die out in the cold on our side of the world because of that science and capitalism, because you have incentive to invest money into like weird innovation that doesn't help the poorest of the poor, only appeal to the richest of the richest, and that's what we'll prove to you, right? So what is closing opposition case? Because I just want to take it out before we move on, right? The case is that secular societies are more advanced, science is good, you get more science, things help, mosque can't take care of imams, right? Note, firstly, on the idea of just science being inherently good, I'm not sure why that can't exist on our side. Like that is note that most of like scientific innovation that restarted science in today's world came in like ancient Iran, came in like ancient Middle Eastern things, which invented chemistry, like ancient India, which invented like most of the mathematics that exist. I think it happens, but note that science is geared toward like benefiting the most vulnerable in the community, because that's what science directs you to do. Science wants you to actually improve the lives of people better, because you have this strong sense of communal values. So you actually improve science towards making things better for people. You want to build like more housing that like actually can take care of people in cheaper and so on, rather than making more luxurious housing on their side of the house. Note that this means that even if science develops better on their side, it doesn't help the poorest of the poor in Bangladesh, as they claim. It helps the most richest people who get to benefit, because they're constantly sold this false delusion that you need a mobile phone, that you need a laptop, that you need all of these new technologies that don't have any meaning to your life, and that you actually want to care about them on their side of the house, and you have to somehow believe in these sort of like false dichotomy, even if it's not improving your life but only makes it worse, as Sonam claims, right? Then they come and talk about like, oh, it leads to like better welfare policies. Note that bureaucratic differences of different religions means you now have to appease to like multiple set of religions, because they don't have the same conception of social welfare. Even if all of the conceptions of social welfare are good, there would be incompatibilities, which means it's impossible for you to help everyone at the same time on their side of the house. So I'm not sure like why things don't happen on their side. Like on our side, at least all of the religion can work together on the same conception of social welfare, means they're easily and more efficiently able to pass these things and help the individual people right here, right? So I think at the end of the day, when they come and talk about just development on their side and like how it's good being poor, note that like you're not in the US as secular society where if you're like don't have food, like you just die off or like you just starve on the street. In societies like Bangladesh and India, like people can go to mosque, get like free food when events are happening. You constantly get to access those benefits. If you don't have a house, you can make a tent and live, and people not calling you out that this is my plot of land, if you live here I'll sue the fuck out of you. So I think like poor people are better able to live their lives 400 years ago, or like in societies which are more communal than their side of the house. So I'm not sure like why the case happens. If the web comes and talks about it, will clearly be new. Okay, let's now move on to like opening opposition, because opening opposition's big push is on the idea of the possibility of incompatibility and why incompatibility matters, right? Like they're like, oh, you might become incompatible with like all of the things you're born into. You might constantly be inescapable. You get opt-in on their side of the house. I just want to quickly take this down, because note that you don't choose who you surround yourself with on either side of the word. This is taken down by Sonam's like idea of like false choices. That is, if I'm born into a religion on their side of the house that I don't subscribe in, my first 18 to 20 years before I can do the opt-in on their side, like I'm like raised and brainwashed into this religion on their side anyway, right? This means that when I now have the option to choose into another religion, I mostly subscribe to all of the values from my own religion. I'm given this false choice because it means that if I leave my religion and move into the other religion, I lose connections with my family and all, because they believe I have to be part of the religion. They're not scared. This is how like religions advertise things. And I constantly feel the dread that I'm losing my most important connections, my most important values that I subscribe to religiously, just to access this one benefit on their side. So if I make that choice, I'm constantly in angst and dread, because I feel like I've lost important aspects of my family identity. community and so on. This is also mechanization of why most people don't opt into their side, into like religions that are not like homophobic, because most of the people value things like their family. This is the reason why you choose to stay in the closet anyway on their side of the house, right? So I'm not sure to what degree like their impacts, even if true, manifest in any way. I'll take PY from over right now.
The important thing that happens is that you lose out on your ability to love. Under the veil of ignorance, you understand that love is something that is core, constitutive, and fundamental. Even if there is a 10% of chance of you never having the ability to do that, this is still significant enough to weigh out over everything that OG proves and CG also tries to prove.
Okay, I just want to give you an intuitive thought experiment, right? Like, just think about your conception of state, right? State doesn't guarantee that you get to marry who you love, right? But state guarantees basic social benefits that are given to you. Maybe I fall in love with someone like at the age of 18, and maybe they don't give a fuck about me, but I don't get to love them in any aspect. I feel tormented by it throughout my life. Sure, maybe that's not the best thing that happens to me. Sure, that's important to my self-fulfillment, but the state cannot guarantee it. But state has a responsibility to guarantee things like basic access to food, like basic access to living standards. That is the most important conception, because only when you fulfill those, only if I'm not starving myself to death, can I access things like love, can I access things like those. Note that if I just die, as Sonam say, I'm not able to access those things. But even if I don't die, like if I have to think about where I'm getting the food on my basis on everyday life, when I think about, oh, I have to go and work in this mine for like 18 hours a day so I can keep food towards my wife and family, I'm not able to love them fully. That metric doesn't become important. Note on our side, by all of the mechanization we have given, you're able to access them much better because of communal values, because of like the societies and religions actually caring about you, but actually having incentive to care about you because you're also part of their religion. On the other side, you frame these people as people of other religions. You want to like advertise them as people who are from other religions, who are like really bad, and like those religions treat them such a way, rather than like look into your own religion per se. But if there's only one religion, you have to care about everyone because it's clearly visible and perceptual. Finally, against OG, because I think OG's like mechanism on like it doesn't deal with the best case of opposition. That is, they come and talk about things like infighting, right? They're talking about like infighting can happen, like it means that like, oh, like society is constantly not able to achieve all of these benefits as they try to claim, like politicians can target people. But note that our case deals with both, like even the best version. That is, even if it's an average secular society, that is like there's no infighting, there's no corruption, there's no politicians fighting with each other. Like you're able to benefit and access, because every time you make that choice to leave a religion, you're filled with existential dread if you made the right choice or not, or whether like you were like leaving your family behind in making these choices. So that constant trauma, the constant existential dread is really, really harmful and exists not depending on whether politicians exist or not. For those reasons, very proud to propose.
Okay. 3, 2, 3, 2, 1. There are two debates in this round. The first is the long diagonal debate, which operates in the vast majority of instances. It is about the average person and their autonomy and probably operates in most scenarios. The second debate is the short diagonal debate, which operates only in the most extreme instances. I'll explain why the long diagonal outweighs the short diagonal in two ways. One, it is probably true that the risk of offense on their side of the house for both opening opposition and closing government is marginal at best. That is to say that opening opposition themselves assert that it is at best a 10% risk. That means that 90% of entities do not get harmed on their side of the house. This is also true for closing government, where I think most people probably get food and water because they work things like jobs. I just do not know why this is the likely comparative that exists on closing government. Secondly, the debate is basically non-mutually exclusive. That's to the point where religions often influence secular tradition. It's likely the case that religious politicians exist on either side of the house. The transphobia and homophobia exist within either world, at the point where religion was often the pivoting point of morality that existed in the past. But this is also true for closing government, and here I'm going to do response to CJ. Firstly, it's unclear why religions are anti-capitalist. Mega pastors exist in tele-evangelical churches exist at this point. We think those often charge you millions of dollars and are literally going and flying Lambos. I think there are large incentives to ask for these kinds of donations and to have rich people on your board of directors. But secondly, it's super important. It's also not mutually exclusive on the comparative level, right? Because even if they are correct that religions donate, I would posit that secular societies also have more. Also have churches. It is probably true that they get lots of money from those on either side of the house, given there is incentive to compete for the poor. But secondly, obviously NGOs exist and charities exist. I'm unclear if the average atheist isn't affected by seeing a child starving. I think they probably still want to donate. I think the intuition comes from this is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation literally solved the malaria in the entire Africa, and Bill Gates out as an atheist in those two species. I think those kinds of things just mean that there are incentives for these kinds of things on either side of the house. I'll pause for a second. 1. Given this, the long diagonal is clearly above the short diagonal, given the certainty of our harms. I'm now going to move on to rebutting and flipping a lot of the opening government claims and why we win. The first thing I want to note is the big missing burden from opening government, which is that I'm unclear why indoctrination actively succeeds when you opt into these kinds of societies. There are 3 specific reasons I have on why indoctrination doesn't succeed. Firstly, we all know that there's often a generation gap. Older priests and others often teach this to you. Know that you were often brought up in a different time, which means younger children often have a very difficult approach to this kind of religion. Secondly, people are generally curious. I would posit that it's very difficult to believe in religion for no reason at the point where society tells you not to question these types of things. But thirdly, obviously there exist things like social media, Twitter, and other types of things. What this means is that you're often exposed to liberal agendas from the West. You often get significant amounts of content that is very different, that makes you question the very base of your religion. So it often means that I read about BLM, even if I'm in Pakistan or in Bangladesh, which often makes me question the base of my religion. The implication of this is twofold. The first thing to note is that this obviously flips onto the opening government meta, because a lot of their case relies on actively believing in this religion. The problem is, I'm unclear what you actually do on their side of the house. Secondly, though, there are obviously differing interpretations of religion. We would posit that this means that you often get significant harms, and there's a massive cognitive dissonance, because I'm told to believe in this, but I often do not. But I often am unable to truly believe to the extent that I want to talk about, which means I don't ask my parents about this, but I often have a double identity. I don't feel fully connected to my religion, and therefore a lot of the community benefits don't exist. The second thing I want to talk about then is community and why we access significantly better communal benefits within our world. I want to be extremely clear on the community harms that exist. Look, it is probably that some degree of community and meaning on their side of the house. The problem on their side, however, is that you are unable to opt into community within the first place. What do I mean by this? Look, even if I have some degree of community, this community is not chosen by me, and it's often quite pernicious. This looks like, for example, in Pakistan, my auntie is asking me repeatedly whether I want to get married, often questioning every decision I make, often having an impeding upon my autonomy significantly. Notice the active harm of having too large a community where you have to be respectful of the vast majority of people. It often means that your own autonomy is restricted, and you cannot engage in these types of things. Opening opposition never mechanizes it to this extent. Secondly, why is it likely to be able to get community within our world? Here's the comparative on our side. Look, it is probably true that you cannot access community to the extent that opening government claims. The difference, however, is threefold. One, I'm unclear why we don't have groups of friends and people who we care about. That's why, for example, the average debater forms debate communities. That's why, for example, when I go play at the chess club for 4 years, I make significant numbers of friends. It is probably true then that outside of the house, there are incentives to form communities, especially when you have similar interests, especially when you care about people, especially when you have incentives to engage with your friends on the comparative. That means that it's probably the difference that we form communities that we're able to opt into. What is the meaning then on the comparative? I'm unclear why you can't find meaning either. Similar to opening government, I just do not know why you do not want to find meaning. There are often incentives to search for it. So my meaning could be playing D&D with my friends. My meaning could be engaging in a lot of good conversations. Difference is that I opt into these types of conversations on the comparative, and I'm able to choose the kind of meaning that I want to choose on our side of the house. What is he weighing on this? But before that, opening government, go for it.
If you can doubt your religion, you can make friends similar to you who are liberal, who also doubt the religion, while thousands of people back you up. If you can't doubt your religion, in that case, opening opposition exists and you don't knife them.
Yeah, I mean, like, opening opposition says that maybe you don't doubt your religion. I'm giving the even if on opening government. I think that's much clearer. Anyway, here's the comparative on our side. Anyway, let's weigh this community analysis on our side of the house. Here's the problem. Even if it's true that there's some liberal friends of yours, they cannot talk about this in society either. They're scared of their parents' backlash. They're scared of having any of the conversations because you are told that you must believe in this and you consistently feel ashamed on their side of the house. I just do not think that this works. What is he weighing on this? One, you're able to form better community because these are people that you actively choose. They're people compatible with your interests. Sorry, what? Compatible with your interests on our side of the house. That means you're able to talk about things with them. You feel way more connected and feel like you have a better support system. Second, I'm unclear what the degree of community does. That is to say, if you have 20 friends versus 5 friends to respond to a crisis, I would rather have 5 times closer to the comparative and who can understand me, which means the way we access community is significantly better. Finally, though, we just get way more agency within our world. And I want to be extremely clear on the degree of agency harm that is done on their side of the house. There are many things that you cannot do when you're in a religion. What this looks like is that you are unable to eat pork, for example, if you're a Muslim. You're unable to go out with women. For example, there are lots of choices that are taken away from you in the comparative when you opt into particular types of religion. Why is this really, really harmful? One, obviously, this limits the extent of choices that you can actually make. Note that opening government says that you have some utility that exists on their side of the house. I really don't care. I'm perfectly fine with conceding you are your brain, and therefore it's perfectly fine that the brain makes decisions. I really don't care about that. What this means is that we just have more choices that you're able to make. This means you can go to different places. You can find different jobs. You're not forced by a community to opt into particular things, which means you can even buy the diversity of experiences. Opening government's response is, but guys, you have to choose particular things. This isn't enough because one, we get a very wider selection of choices, but second, there are very different influences. So in a secular society, your school teachers are often atheists, your friends are atheists, while your parents are religious, which means countervailing influences often balance each other, providing you way more choices than abroad. That means the kind of utility we access way more, the way we access utility is significantly better, and therefore we are likely going to have better outcomes in terms of agency and utility given we have more things. Very proud to propose.